It started 8 years ago, on what should have been just another quiet evening. Instead, my world imploded. My wife Julia and I had been married for 18 years. We had a daughter, Ellie, who was 16 at the time, our pride and joy. But everything began to unravel when I stumbled upon text messages on Julia's phone. Messages that weren't for me. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. Julia had been having an affair with her coworker, Brandon, for months. Worse, Ellie knew about it and had kept the secret. I'll never forget the confrontation. I'd been sitting in the living room, my laptop open, staring at the evidence I had gathered. Ellie walked in just as I told Julia I wanted a divorce. Julia burst into tears, begging me not to ruin the family, and that's when Ellie screamed at me, "If you ruin our family over Mom's little affair, you're not my dad anymore." That broke me. How could my daughter side with her mother's betrayal? How could Julia still call it a little affair after the devastation it caused? I left that night. I needed space to think, to figure out how to move forward. But that space turned into something much longer. I didn't just leave the house, I vanished. No one knew where I was, not even my closest friends. 8 years later, I had rebuilt my life. I lived in a small but beautiful coastal town, far from my old world. I was proposing to my girlfriend, Laura, a kind, smart, and loving woman who had helped me heal from the scars Julia and Ellie left behind. The sun was setting, the ring box was in my hand, and Laura's smile made me feel whole again. That's when I saw her. Ellie. She was standing at the edge of the restaurant patio, her face streaked with tears. Her hair was disheveled, and she was visibly pregnant. My heart raced as I walked toward her. Memories of our last conversation, her screaming betrayal, flooded my mind. "Daddy," she sobbed, "I'm pregnant. I need money. Could you sponsor me?" The word sponsor hit me harder than any punch. I hadn't heard her call me daddy in years. It felt manipulative, desperate. My instincts told me to turn her away. But part of me, the part that still remembered her as my little girl, hesitated. "Ellie," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Why are you here? You made it clear you didn't want me in your life." She sniffled. "I didn't mean it back then. I was scared. I didn't want us to fall apart. Mom didn't either." I nodded, my jaw tight. And yet, everything fell apart anyway. She reached for my hand. "Please, I need your help." Laura stood behind me, waiting silently. She knew parts of the story, but had never met Ellie. "Laura," I said, turning to her, "could you give us a moment?" She nodded and went inside. I looked at Ellie, the daughter who had once adored me but chose betrayal. "Tell me the truth, Ellie. What's going on?" Her story spilled out in fragments. Her boyfriend had left her after learning about the pregnancy. She was struggling financially and had turned to me as a last resort. "Ellie," I said, my voice firm but kind, "you didn't just lose me as a father. You chose to push me out. And now you're here because you think I'm the only person who can solve this for you." She started crying harder. "I didn't know how much I hurt you. I was a kid. I was stupid. But please, Daddy, I need you now." I took a deep breath. I wanted to help her, but I couldn't ignore the years of pain and silence. "Ellie, I'll help you, but not how you think." Her eyes lit up with hope. "You will?" "Yes. I'll find you resources, connect you with someone who can guide you through this. But I won't just hand over money. Not anymore." Her face fell. "So you won't? You're just going to push me away again?" "No, Ellie, you pushed me away. And now, if you want me back in your life, it'll take more than just asking for money." She stared at me, searching for something in my expression. "What do you want from me?" "I want honesty, accountability, a real relationship, not one based on guilt or desperation. I want to know the person you've become, not the one who screamed at me to leave." Ellie left that night without the money, but with something more valuable, a chance at redemption. Whether she would take it was up to her. Laura and I returned to our table, and she held my hand as I slid the ring on her finger. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the pain of the past and ready to embrace the future. It had been a week since Ellie's surprise appearance, and I was still trying to process everything. I thought cutting ties with my past had freed me, but now it felt like the chains had just been hidden. Julia's betrayal and Ellie's heartbreaking choice to side with her had left scars deeper than I realized. And then I received the letter. It was Julia's handwriting, unmistakable. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Tim, I didn't want Ellie to come to you, but she insisted. She thought you deserved to know. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But everything I did was for Ellie's sake. She needs you now. Don't let your anger at me punish her. Please help her. If you ever loved me or her, you'll do this. Julia. I sat there staring at the paper, my jaw clenched. Everything she did for Ellie's sake? Using our daughter as a weapon to manipulate me after all these years? That wasn't love. It was calculated cruelty. I called Ellie. Meet me tomorrow, I said coldly, and bring your mother. The next day we met at a park near my house. The air was heavy with tension. Julia arrived with Ellie, her new boyfriend, tagging along like a smug accessory. Julia looked older, but her eyes still carried that infuriating smugness that told me she thought she was in control. Let's get this over with, I said, arms crossed. Julia started with a sigh, as if she were the victim. Tim, I didn't want this to turn into a fight. Ellie, stop, I cut her off, my voice sharp. Ellie didn't come here alone. You sent her to do your dirty work, just like you did 8 years ago. Julia scowled, but Ellie tried to interject. Dad, it wasn't like that. Don't, I said, holding up my hand. I'm talking to her now. Julia crossed her arms. You think you're some saint? You abandoned us. You left me to pick up the pieces. I laughed bitterly. Pick up the pieces? You were the one who shattered everything. You didn't just betray me. You taught Ellie that betrayal is acceptable, as long as it comes with excuses. And now, you have the audacity to show up and lecture me? Julia's boyfriend stepped forward, clearly trying to puff himself up. Hey man, calm down. No need to get all aggressive. I turned to him slowly, sizing him up. He was taller than me, younger but soft, entitled in the way only a man who had taken something that wasn't his could be. And who are you? I asked. The latest in Julia's long line of mistakes? Watch your mouth, he said, taking a step closer. Or what? I said, stepping forward to meet him. He swung first, a wild, amateurish punch. I dodged easily, my fist snapping into his jaw, in a move so clean it surprised even me. He staggered back, clutching his face. Julia screamed, Tim, stop! What are you doing? What I should have done years ago, I snapped. Her boyfriend lunged again, this time with more desperation than skill. I grabbed his arm mid-swing, twisted it behind his back, and shoved him to his knees. Stay down, I hissed, releasing him with a shove. He scrambled to his feet, his bravado replaced with humiliation. Julia looked horrified, but her arrogance hadn't faded completely. You're insane, Tim. This is exactly why I left you. I turned to her, chest heaving. No, Julia. You left because you're selfish. You left because you didn't care about me or our family, and you ruined Ellie in the process. You don't get to play the victim. Ellie was crying now, shaking her head. Daddy, stop. Please. I didn't know this would happen. I softened at her words, but stayed firm. Ellie, you're an adult now. You're responsible for your choices. You sided with her back then, and I can't change that. But if you want my help now, there are conditions. 1. Julia stays out of my life. Forever. 2. You take responsibility for your actions and your life. Ellie looked torn, but Julia snapped, You're not going to manipulate her like that. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Manipulate? That's your game, Julia, not mine. I turned to Ellie one last time. The choice is yours. My door is open to you, but not to her. Decide who you want in your life. Ellie didn't respond as I walked away. That night, I sat with Laura, explaining everything. Did I do the right thing? I asked. She took my hand, her voice steady. You stood up for yourself, for your peace. That's what matters. I nodded, feeling the weight of years lifting. The fight wasn't just with Julia or her boyfriend. It was with the version of me that had let them take everything without a fight. That version was gone. Forever. I couldn't let it go. The confrontation with Julia and her boyfriend lingered in my mind, and Ellie's tears haunted me. Every fiber of my being told me to move on, but something darker, deeper, refused to let me rest. Julia had destroyed my life once, and now she was back, acting as if she was entitled to forgiveness and second chances. She had weaponized Ellie's love against me, and for that, there needed to be consequences. This time, I wasn't going to be the man who walked away. The first step was gathering information. I knew Julia wasn't as squeaky clean as she pretended to be. Her smug new boyfriend, Dean, was all flash and no substance. He reeked of overcompensation. It didn't take long to dig into his background. A few calls to an old PI friend and some discreet inquiries revealed everything I needed to know. Dean was drowning in debt, had a history of shady business deals, and was currently using Julia's name to open new lines of credit. She was either too naive or too complicit to see it. Perfect. Next, I turned my attention to Julia. For years, I had kept silent about the truth of her affair, even when my own reputation had taken a hit. Friends and family whispered about me abandoning my family, while Julia painted herself as the wronged party. But now, I had the receipts, quite literally. The old phone records, the texts I had saved, and the photos taken by the private investigator all those years ago. It was time for everyone to see the truth. I reached out to our mutual acquaintances, her workplace, even the neighborhood Facebook group she was so active in. I didn't post anything outright, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I sent anonymous tips, shared evidence in private messages, and let the whispers grow into a roar. Within days, Julia's perfect image started to crack. Her coworkers looked at her differently. Friends started distancing themselves. The PTA moms who once adored her were now sharing screenshots in their group chats. She tried to do damage control, but the seeds of doubt were already sown. While Julia's life began to unravel, I set my sights on Dean. It wasn't hard to find the car dealership where he worked. He loved to brag about it on social media. I paid a visit, pretending to be a potential customer. As we walked through the showroom, I casually mentioned some of the shady deals I'd heard about, dropping just enough detail to make his manager's ears perk up. You know, I'm not sure I want to buy from someone with that kind of reputation, I said loudly enough for others to hear. Dean's face turned crimson, but he couldn't lash out without proving my point. Within a week, I heard through the grapevine that he'd been fired. But I wasn't done yet. Julia's finances were next. Using the information I had gathered, I anonymously tipped off her bank about suspicious activity on her accounts. It didn't take long for them to freeze everything while they investigated. Julia's credit cards were declined at the grocery store, her checks bounced, and she was left scrambling to figure out what had gone wrong. By the time she realized Dean had been siphoning money from her, it was too late. He had vanished, leaving her with mountains of debt and no way to cover it. The final blow came when I reached out to Ellie. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and I wanted her to see the truth. Not just about Julia, but about everything that had happened between us. I invited her to dinner, just the two of us. She arrived looking hesitant but hopeful. Over the meal, I laid everything out. The texts, the photos, the lies Julia had told her over the years. At first, she resisted defending her mother. But as I showed her more evidence, her defenses crumbled. She used me, Ellie whispered, tears streaming down her face. She used both of us, I said gently. But it's not too late to break free from her manipulation. Ellie nodded, her expression hardening. In the weeks that followed, Ellie moved out of Julia's house and cut contact with her. Julia, now broke, disgraced, and alone, tried to reach out to me, but I ignored every call and message. She had built her life on lies and betrayal, and now it was all crumbling around her. As for me, I finally felt at peace, not because of the revenge itself, but because I had reclaimed my power. Julia had taken everything from me once, but this time, I was the one walking away, with my head held high. She had played her game, and I had ended it, permanently. After Julia's life had crumbled, I thought I could finally put everything behind me. But as the days passed, I realized something that reignited the fire in my chest. Her family, her parents and siblings had always been complicit, standing by her side, enabling her lies, and turning me into the villain in every story. They hadn't just taken her side when the divorce happened. They had gone out of their way to smear me. painting me as the absentee father who deserved to be abandoned. It was time to remind them of the truth. Julia's parents, George and Elaine, had always been proud of their reputation in the community. George was a retired banker, and Elaine was a self-proclaimed socialite who loved hosting fundraisers and charity events. Their family's image was everything to them. Their reputation had taken a hit when Julia's financial troubles became public, but they still clung to their veneer of respectability. I started small. Anonymously, I sent the private investigators photos of Julia's affair to a few key people in their social circle, the kind of people who loved to gossip. It didn't take long for whispers to reach Elaine's charity luncheons, where her peers politely smiled to her face while exchanging scandalous details behind her back. Next, I turned to Julia's brother, Nathan. He had always been a smug, self-righteous jerk who took pleasure in mocking me during family gatherings. He worked as a real estate agent, proudly advertising himself as the go-to guy for high-end properties. It didn't take much digging to uncover the skeletons in his closet: hidden fines for unethical practices and a few angry former clients who felt cheated. Using a burner email, I reached out to those clients and shared the evidence I'd found. I even dropped an anonymous tip to the local real estate board. Within weeks, Nathan's glowing reputation took a nosedive. His name was dragged through the mud in online reviews, and he lost a couple of lucrative deals. Then, there was Julia's sister, Rachel. Rachel had been the most vocal in defending Julia, even posting snide comments about me on social media after the divorce. Her self-righteous attitude stemmed from her position as a kindergarten teacher, where she played the role of a saint who could do no wrong. But Rachel wasn't as perfect as she seemed. A few former coworkers had complained about her tendency to gossip and play favorites among the staff. I reached out to one of them anonymously and shared screenshots of Rachel's social media posts, highlighting her toxic behavior. The complaints were quietly forwarded to her school's administration. Not long after, Rachel's reputation among the staff soured. She wasn't fired, but she was sidelined, excluded from key decisions and events. The crowning moment came when I confronted George directly. It was during one of Elaine's charity events, where I knew he'd be. I dressed sharply, blending in with the crowd, until I saw him alone, sipping his drink. "George," I said, stepping into his line of sight. He stiffened when he saw me. "Tim, I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. "I'm sure you didn't, but I wanted to thank you." "For what?" he asked, his voice cautious. "For raising a daughter who taught me the most valuable lesson of my life," I said, my tone dripping with venom. "Never trust a liar, and never let someone like her control your future." His face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, I added, "By the way, you might want to check your phone. I hear people are asking questions about how you handled those pension accounts during your banking days. I wonder how your old clients would feel about some irregularities." His face went pale. He opened his mouth, but I walked away before he could say a word. Julia's family had built their lives on a foundation of arrogance and lies, and I made sure that foundation cracked. I didn't ruin them outright. That wasn't my goal. I simply made sure the truth came to light, and that the consequences of their actions finally caught up to them. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of justice. Julia had destroyed my family, but now hers was falling apart under the weight of their own hypocrisy, and I was finally free. The fallout from Julia's family had spread like wildfire. The carefully constructed facade of perfection they clung to was now in tatters. George, Elaine, Nathan, and Rachel were all scrambling to contain the damage, but the cracks were too deep, the whispers too loud. I had dismantled their dynasty of self-righteousness piece by piece, but it still wasn't enough. They hadn't just wronged me. They had actively tried to erase me. Every insult, every lie they spread to justify Julia's betrayal, every time they dismissed my pain to protect their image, it all still burned. I wasn't done, not until they truly felt what they had inflicted. I started with George. The pension fraud I had alluded to at the charity event wasn't entirely baseless. Years ago, when Julia and I were still together, I'd overheard George bragging about how he'd creatively managed some accounts during his tenure at the bank. At the time, I didn't think much of it. He was just another smug banker. But now it was ammunition. I reached out to a whistleblower group that specialized in financial misconduct. With the evidence I'd gathered from old conversations and some additional digging into public records, I presented them with enough to raise eyebrows. It didn't take long for the whispers to reach the right ears. Soon, George was facing a formal investigation into his banking practices. His legacy as a respected financier? Gone. Elaine's downfall came next. She thrived on her reputation as a charitable, well-connected socialite. But Elaine had a habit of using her charity events to line her own pockets, skimming from the donations while claiming it was for administrative costs. I anonymously tipped off a local journalist who had a reputation for exposing corruption. Within weeks, a detailed expose hit the local papers, complete with receipts. Elaine's name became synonymous with greed. Her social circle vanished, and her charity dissolved under public scrutiny. Nathan was already on the ropes after the damage I'd done to his real estate career. But I had one more card to play. I discovered he'd been using his clients' confidential information to make side deals for personal gain. Using a burner account, I leaked this information to a few influential real estate firms. It spread like wildfire, and Nathan's license was officially suspended pending an investigation. No one wanted to work with him after that. The smug jerk who once mocked me at family gatherings was now unemployed, with mounting legal fees. Rachel was the final piece. Her teaching job had already become uncomfortable after her coworkers turned against her. But I wanted to hit her where it hurt the most, her spotless record with parents. I discovered she had once mishandled a bullying complaint involving a student, brushing it under the rug to avoid controversy. I anonymously forwarded the details to the parents involved, along with evidence of her social media rants about me. The parents demanded action from the school. Rachel was called into an emergency meeting and placed on administrative leave. Her career in education was effectively over. When all was said and done, Julia's family was in shambles. Their finances wrecked, their reputations destroyed, and their connections severed. They had spent years looking down on me, treating me as an outsider, a failure. Now they were the ones ostracized. The most satisfying moment came a few weeks later when Julia called me. Her voice was unsteady, her usual confidence replaced with desperation. "Tim," she said, "you've made your point. You've taken everything from us. Why? What more do you want?" I let the silence hang for a moment before answering. "I didn't take anything from you, Julia. I just made sure the truth came out. The rest? That's all on you." "You're a monster," she hissed. "No, Julia," I said calmly. "I'm just done being your victim." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. Julia and her family had always believed they were untouchable, that they could rewrite reality to suit their needs. But they forgot one thing. Lies always crumble under the weight of the truth. And now, I could finally move forward, leaving them to face the ruins of the life they had built on deceit. Weeks passed, and the storm I'd unleashed on Julia and her family began to settle. The headlines faded, their influence evaporated, and the people they once controlled moved on, happy to forget their former ties. For the first time in nearly a decade, I felt the weight of their betrayal lift from my shoulders. I could breathe again. I had burned their empire of lies to the ground, but I wasn't gloating. I was simply at peace. Ellie was the only loose thread in my life. She had stayed distant after our last conversation, likely caught in the middle of her loyalty to her mother and her anger at the revelations I'd shown her. But one evening, as I sat on the patio with Laura, watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Ellie, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. Laura, ever perceptive, noticed my hesitation. "It's her, isn't it?" I nodded, unsure of what to say. "You should see her," Laura said gently. "Whatever happens, you deserve the chance to heal that wound." We met the next day at a small cafe near her new apartment. She looked nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd reach out," I admitted. Ellie took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about everything you said. About Mom, about the past. I've been angry at you for so long, but I think I was really just angry at myself." I raised an eyebrow. "Yourself?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I knew what Mom did was wrong. I knew, but I didn't want to lose her. And I didn't want to believe you could leave us, even though she gave you every reason to." So I blamed you because it was easier. Her words hit me like a wave, but I stayed calm. Ellie, you were a kid. It wasn't your job to fix what she broke. But I helped her break it, she whispered. And I'm so sorry, Dad. For everything. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Ellie, I forgave you a long time ago. You were a victim in all this, just like I was. What matters now is where we go from here. Ellie and I talked for hours that day. She opened up about her struggles with Julia's manipulation, her regrets, and her fears for the future. I told her about the years I spent rebuilding myself, the pain of losing her, and the hope I had always held for this moment. When we finally said goodbye, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Julia's family faded into irrelevance. George and Elaine sold their house to cover their debts and moved out of state, their social standing in ruins. Nathan took up a menial sales job after his real estate career collapsed, and Rachel became a substitute teacher, barely making ends meet. As for Julia, she moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town, her debts keeping her tethered to the life she had created. She tried reaching out to Ellie a few times, but my daughter had grown wiser. She kept her distance, focusing on her own life and the relationship we were rebuilding. On a bright spring afternoon, Laura and I stood at the altar, surrounded by friends and loved ones. As I said my vows, I spotted Ellie in the crowd, smiling through tears. For the first time, I truly believed that life had given me a second chance, a real one. When the ceremony was over, Ellie hugged me tightly. "You deserve this, Dad," she said. "I'm so happy for you." So was I. The past would always be there, a scar I couldn't erase. But scars are a reminder of survival, proof that even in the face of betrayal and pain, it's possible to heal, to rebuild, and to thrive. This was my new beginning, and this time, nothing could take it away.